Our plan is to build 2 dormers over the loft, one on each side. Their purpose is to breathe new light into an otherwise dark part of the cabin, and to create a little more space in the loft. Well, we have the first one down, which means 1 to go. Let's get started. Well, both dormers are now complete, or at least to the point where we can leave them to complete other tasks, namely getting the steel on the roof. But I couldn't be more happy with how these dormers turned out. They're strong, they're sturdy, they add a lot more to the character of this cabin. They add more light, obviously, and a bit more space, especially once we remove these small sections of purlins and add supports underneath them. I decided to go with the dormers instead of skylights because those skylights would bring in more light than the dormers do. They just don't open up the space, and as well, I don't think they're as visually appealing as these dormers are. Of course, they took more time, and if we didn't do the dormers, we probably would have had the roof completely on by now. But sometimes you just have to put in the extra time because this cabin's going to be around for a long time. I just don't want to do things that save time only so that I can regret it later. So we put in the time, we put in the dormers, and I'm happy with that. Anyway, now that these are done, I can focus on getting this roof completed, which is something I'm very excited to do. So obviously I don't have any space between the rafters that I will be filling up with insulation. There's no attic space up here that I can use to do that sort of thing. So I've decided to buy some foam board insulation and put it on top of the roof decking with some membrane underneath. And then I'll be putting some steel over top of that. So I'll be showing you a more in-depth look at how exactly I'll be doing that. But I believe that's by far the best alternative, is to put the insulation on top of the decking and properly protect it. In that way, we have the benefit of having this roof somewhat insulated as opposed to not having it insulated at all, because insulating the underside of this roof just isn't an option. Now I was ready to start on the roofing, which I was anxious to do. That is, until I discovered a problem which would delay those plans. A couple episodes ago, I mentioned that a porcupine has been coming into our cabin and eating bits of plywood that I have in there, which I'm not too happy about. I don't want my plywood being eaten, and it's probably not good for the porcupine either, although I'm sure he's probably got a pretty strong stomach. But anyway, I don't want him in there anymore. And I don't want them anywhere near the cabin. So what my dad and I did is we put sheets of steel at the front door and at the back door, just like a porcupine gate, like a kitty gate to keep them from getting in. And it's worked, sort of. So now instead of going inside the cabin, he goes underneath the cabin and he's chewing away at the plywood that we have down on the floor right now. The cabin is a little too tall for him to stand up and chew on the plywood. So what he does is he leans up against the boulders and he's able to prop himself up and get up high enough that he can chew on the plywood. So there's 9 boulders underneath the cabin. So there's 9 spots underneath of it that he's been chewing away on. My idea is that I'm going to get sheets of metal lath, which is what I used between the courses of the logs this spring in preparation for the chinking. So I'm thinking about taking these sheets of metal lath and tacking them up on the underside of the cabin so that Mr. Porcupine can't eat at the plywood anymore, because I'm pretty sure he can't eat through the metal lath. Who knows at this point, but I'm pretty sure that he's not going to like chewing on the metal. Anyway, I'm going to take you underneath the cabin and you can see a bit of the damage he's done. And if you have any suggestions for me how I can stop this porcupine from eating my plywood, it would be much appreciated. Naturally, the porcupine problem took priority, which meant that I had to protect the underside of the cabin first before I could do anything topside. I wasn't too impressed that Mr. Quills decided to rearrange my schedule for the day, but such is life in the woods. The roof will just have to wait a little longer because I know the porcupine's teeth won't. The Porcupine buffet is officially closed. Hopefully, Mr. Quills will get the hint. Now I could finally turn my attention back to the roof, starting with the installation of 2 anchor points at the ridge, which I will clip my safety harness into while working on the roof. Thanks to a viewer suggestion, I've added this self-retracting lanyard to my collection of fall arrest gear. It keeps the line snug, which means that I'm less likely to trip over it. And if I were to slip, the lanyard will lock up, preventing me from sliding any further down the roof. But even if I don't fall fast enough to trigger the lock, the lanyard will stop paying out no matter what at 11 feet. Either way, it will catch me before the ground does. That being said, I've noticed the lock is quite sensitive. Now I was finally ready to apply the ice and water shield to the roof. At least I thought I was. Well, we have a problem. I was getting ready to install this ice and water shield over the barn board sheathing, and I was reading through the instructions to make sure that I install this exactly the way the manufacturer intended it to be, and that's when I came across it. The instructions say specifically not to lay this over pine, spruce, or cedar boards, and that's because the resin that is naturally present in these boards could have an adverse reaction with the adhesive that's on the underside of this peel and stick roofing. The manufacturer says that when the resin and the adhesive come into contact, that there's a chance that they could begin to ooze a black sort of substance. It would cause some running and some dripping, which would stain the eaves on most houses, and there would be an unsightly black goo that would be coming out of the roofing. So not good, not preferable, but it would be even worse on this cabin because the leak barrier goes directly on top of the sheathing, which we can see from the inside. So if it were to begin to drip and ooze, it would come out between these barn boards and drip inside the cabin, which would be absolutely awful. And the thing about this peel and stick roofing is that once it's put in place, you're not getting it back off again. There's no way to fix the problem if I were to start seeing it dripping from the inside. So I was excited to get started on this today, but it is going to have to wait just a little bit longer because I want to make sure that I'm doing things correctly. After taking some time to carefully weigh my options, I decided to sheath over the barn boards with a second layer, this time with plywood, which is compatible with the ice and water shield. I returned the next day with the plywood and my dad's help. What a champ. Always there to lend his brain and brawn, especially when I'm in a pinch. I would have preferred not to spend the extra money on the 3/8 plywood, but I also didn't want to do away with a leak barrier. Ultimately, I decided to go with the plywood, as I believed it was the best option overall. like a good fit so far.
Perfect. How about the top?
It's perfect.
Gap's good there?
Yeah, it's good. It's good all around. It looks
excellent.
It's a perfect piece. Normally, we wouldn't have worried about taping the seams, but since a rainstorm was on its way, we did so to keep water from getting into the cabin. Well, there you have it. Half the roof is ready, and the other is soon to follow. It seems like just about everything in this episode was 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, but progress is progress, and we've certainly been doing a lot of that, even if it hasn't been in a straight line. I just hope we can move forward from here without any further hindrances, because the air is already beginning to change, signaling to us that fall is closer than we'd like to admit. Which reminds me, if you're in the market for a cozy sweater, why not snag yourself an outsider hoodie? Or perhaps a mug to hold your coffee and warm your hands during the cold and crisp days that are soon to come. As you know, I always wear my outsider hoodie whenever I work in the bush, which means they've had to endure a lot of punishment. From branch snags to wood grain scrubs, nails in the front pocket, and constant washings, all without suffering a single tear so far. And that's something I can't even say for my jeans. If you're interested in popping over to the Outsider store on Teespring, I'll be sure to leave a link in the description below. Any purchase you make will support this channel and will keep you stylish in the process. Anyway, that's it for now. Until next time, my friends. Stay safe, be well, and God bless.